There were three great matches this past week, setting up the Star Wars Tournament Finals and closing out the first round of the INNERGEEKDOM Tournament. Hello and welcome to Repeat the Question. I'm David Sackrider, and this is your one-stop shop for everything related to the world of the movie Trivia Schmoedown. First up, before we get into the main meat of the show, I just wanted to give a thank you to everyone out there for checking out the show. Especially huge thank you to Christian Harloff for shouting us out and for everybody else who took the time to check out the show over this past week. It's really meant the world to me. So thank you for being here. And the reason you're here is to break down some Schmoedown stuff. So let's get into it. The first thing that I want to talk about is a little bit of news. We had the first confirmations for the singles tournament come out over this past week. Last week, when the show aired, Ben Bateman had confirmed that he was out of the tournament, and since then we've had plenty of people be confirmed that they were going to be in it. Those people include Bonnie Somerville for the Burning Droogs, Rachel Silvestrini for the Den, Mark Riley for the Finstock Exchange, Adam Collins for Corruption, William Bibiani and Perry Nemiroff for the Quirky Mercs, Jeff Snyder and Mark Andreyko for the Rockstars, and Paul Oyama and Liz Shannon Miller for Swag. A lot of these names are to be expected. Perry Nemiroff was picked up in free agency, so we would have assumed that we were going to see her in either a single or a team's tourney. William Bibiani and Mark Riley are both former champions. Jeff Snyder and Mark Andreyko, both former teams champion. Paul Oyama, former champion. Liz Shannon Miller, former. Her last singles match was in the tournament, but the one before that was a matchup against Paul Oyama for in a number one contender match. So, all of those names are elite level talent in the singles division. So I don't think there was any surprise to see them listed or going into the tournament. I think the two biggest surprises that people had coming out of this first wave of confirmations, the first one is the first name on the list is Bonnie Somerville. It's a really interesting choice given her 11-10 loss to Brett Sheridan earlier this season. I'm not going to count her out because she's had plenty of time to improve as a player since that last match, but I would think that doesn't bode well for any managers looking at the tournament. So I'm really surprised to see her included in this list of competitors competing. I'm especially surprised considering that the Burning Droogs still are kind of managerless at the moment. So who submitted her to the tournament? Was it kind of a committee of the faction deciding who was going to be in? And I'm really curious to see how that decision was made. And I'm also really curious to see how she's going to do in the tournament, given her past history, because, you can only go up from where she was currently. But I don't think that it's necessarily a bad choice, but it is a curious choice, especially if you look at some of the other members of the team. So obviously I would think that the other three spots are going to be made up of some combination of Alonzo Duralde, Jader Paramo, Whitney Seibold, and Scott Mance. Scott Mance was picked up in free agency, so I would assume that he's probably a lock for the singles tournament. Alonzo Duralde and Whitney Seibold have both been really strong in teams, but haven't really had the opportunity to compete in singles. So maybe there's an opening there for them to compete. And obviously Jader Paramo was acquired in the trade, in the Ethan Irwin trade earlier this season, but he has a win under his belt already, so that could bump him up in the rankings a little bit as far as the tournament matchup is concerned. So I don't know who's going to fill those other three spots, but honestly, if you were asking me before any of the confirmations were made, those were the four that I would have told you were in the tournament for the Droogs. So it'll be interesting to see who else they choose to go with to supplement Somerville. And look, at the end of the day, it's not all just about wins and losses. And what Somerville brings to the table is that little extra star power that might bring somebody extra to the Schmoedown from outside of it. So, even if she goes out there and loses in the first round, maybe we're bringing somebody new into this fandom, and I'm all for that. I'm all for new people discovering my favorite sport in the world. So, there may be extra positives here that aren't just correlated to wins and losses. And, the Burning Droogs, they certainly aren't in that front pack, but they are kind of a few wins away from maybe being able to be in a position to contend. So if you're looking at it from a purely win-loss perspective, it is very interesting that they would choose to go with her, especially because they need all the points they can get in the singles tournament. The other team to look at for their choice is the Den. And I want to say this right off the bat. I don't think that Rachel Silvestrini is a bad choice for a player to go into the tournament. She's had strong showings in the tournament before. She just narrowly lost to John Roca last year. I think that she has a tournament run in her, but the Den's sitting on a lot of talent right now. So it's surprising for me to see her in the tournament. Somebody I look to as almost a for sure lock for the tournament is Ben Goddard. He was a later round pick, but if they're really trying to push him for Rookie of the Year, which I think they should, I think he's got the strongest resume for it at the moment. If they're really trying to push him for Rookie of the Year, then he's got to make waves in the singles tournament, because if he doesn't, that strong first half of the season isn't going to be enough to carry him through the back half of the season. Especially if Parker makes a run in IG, if the Barbarian makes a run in IG, or the Barbarian makes a run in singles, that will hurt Goddard in the long run, because, if you don't challenge for a title, it's hard to win Rookie of the Year unless none of the rookies this season challenge for a title, which is a possibility also. And, when it comes to voting for those awards, a lot of times what it comes down to is what you saw last, what you were last thinking about. Tom Dagnino won Manager of the Year last season. He might have deserved it. He might not have deserved it. But at the end of the day, he left spectacular with the team's belt and the singles belt. And so, that's what won him the Manager of the Year. It didn't matter what happened the rest of the year to that point. It was just what was fresh in everybody's mind. And that's so. All of this is to say that I would imagine that we're going to also see Ben Goddard in the tournament to go along with his team's partner, Rachel Silvestrini. But then you've also got Paul Preston on the team. You've also got Tom on the team, and you've also got James White on the team, who was acquired in the Brandon Hanna trade. A lot of people are thinking that, Paul Preston, James White, and Tom were all first and second round picks. So it seems crazy to think that you might leave out one of those three. And that's, I think, where the issue comes in with Rachel Silvestrini, because there's so much talent in the Den. You're talking about 3 first and second round picks, where one of them has to sit out. That's insane. And, a lot of people are thinking that that Kate Mulligan would go with the people that have been on her team the longest. So maybe we'll see Paul and Tom in the tournament. But then what was the point of making the James White trade for Brandon Hanna if you're ultimately not going to use James White? So then, who does he replace? Does he replace Paul Preston? I doubt it. I think Paul Preston is a run away from having a belt, and the singles tournament is a good chance to do it. Maybe Tom's the one that sits out then. It's hard to say. We've only seen him in teams to this point. Maybe he just doesn't have an interest in singles, even though he said that he has an interest in the past. It's interesting. And this isn't even to talk about the other talent on the Den that we haven't seen this season. Alex Marzonia is on the team. there are plenty of other options that the Den has in their wheelhouse to fill those other 3 spots outside of Rachel Silvestrini. So this isn't a knock on Rachel Silvestrini. It's not a knock on her as a competitor, other than to say that there are other players on her team that look on paper better than her, or look on paper as better picks for the tournament than her. And I don't know, maybe she'll go into the tournament and prove everybody wrong. And honestly, I hope that she does, because what do I know? I'm just an analyst at this point. But looking at it on paper, it seems pretty crazy that the 4 picks weren't Paul Preston, Tom, Ben Goddard, and James White. And what I'm really scared to see is that Ben Goddard gets left off this singles tournament, which could be a possibility, because I think he's the front runner for Rookie of the Year right now, and leaving him off the tournament is basically saying that you don't want to win that award. So now we're going to keep things rolling forward. We're going to move on to just a great match. This was a phenomenal match. We're talking about Andres Ace Cabrera taking on Laura Kelly in the Star Wars tournament semifinal. And look, I said it last week. I said that Ace is a dark horse to win this whole tournament, and he came out into this match and really showed that he has it in him. At the end of round 1, the score is 11-9 in favor of Ace. And honestly, I remember thinking to myself, watching this match at the end of round 1, and I was like, man, Ace looks like a completely different competitor. I talked about it with Dimolanta when he played Scrimshaw, about how he had this eye of the tiger. Well, it's almost as if Ace stole that eye of the tiger away from him, because that's exactly what I saw coming out of Ace in this match. He was just completely locked in. He looked totally different from when we saw him play in his previous 2 matches. And so I kind of knew we were in for something special upon seeing this round 1. And look, Laura Kelly missed 1 question in the whole match. It comes in this round 1 question with the ages question, which I felt was a tough question. But I'm not nearly entrenched in the Star Wars stuff as they are, so everything's a tough question to me. But even still, in round 2, Ace follows it up by going perfect in Rogue One. Then Kelly goes perfect in Mixed Bag. She's originally ruled that she didn't get a point on a question. She challenges it, and ultimately, great challenge, because it's a make or break moment for her with Ace perfect up to that point, and as we know now, perfect through the rest of the game. She had to challenge that if she had any hope of winning the game, and even though the challenge goes her way, she still isn't quite able to pull it out. So really, that challenge was really big, and she uses it correctly there. On the flip side of things, Winston tried to counter challenge it, but he came in too late. And I think that's just unfortunate for him, because I think he kind of had a valid challenge. And, his idea was, if my guy can't get the points, then nobody could get the points. And with the way that Ace was playing, it was a smart move. Ultimately, they decided they couldn't see it in time, so they couldn't rule the challenge in his favor, which... it's a shortcoming of the digital matches. If they're in studio, he can just say, hang on, I want to counter challenge. So I guess we just have to accept the fact that we're in the digital setting. So that's just not an option, but it feels really unfortunate for the league, I guess, that they weren't able to have that challenge. And, I don't want a proactive challenge happening where at the end of the round, they're going back to challenge things that happened earlier on different questions. Like, I do think there should be a time limit for challenges, but I think that there also should be a little bit more leeway in these digital settings, especially when you've got somebody who's sitting in the waiting room and doesn't have the opportunity to actually yell out loud. It's the same thing we kind of talked about in Ace's first match when Roxy was having trouble being able to remind Quevedo that he had multiple choice. That's, a major issue. And it's the exact same kind of issue here that is a shortcoming of the digital match. And I don't think there's any real solution to the problem, just that it is a problem. And I think that knowing that it's a problem means that there needs to be a little bit more leniency in the way that rule is carried out. But as we close out the game in round 3, they both go perfect. Ace hits that really difficult 5. The legend is that Alex Damon didn't even know that 5-pointer. So, he's looking really strong and he closes it out. Perfect game for Andres Ace Cabrera. He wins 31-29. He's the first competitor to go 3-0 in the Star Wars division. He is improving every single match. And if we take a look at the bracket, our Star Wars finals are set. It's Andrew DiMolanta taking on Andres Ace Cabrera. It's the FinStock Exchange taking on Swag. It's your first and second place teams going on there as if this match didn't have enough drama. But honestly, I'm expecting both competitors to go perfect in this one. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't see that, because with the way they're playing, with the way that Ace is playing, moving through this bracket, he's improved every single match. And that's dangerous for DiMolanta because DiMolanta came out really strong. He had his perfect game first and then kind of dipped a little in the Molly Damon match. So, if we're looking at trajectory here, if Ace is going up and DiMolanta's trending down, that doesn't look good for DiMolanta. And that's not say trending down is like a hair, he was hardly that much worse. But on the flip side of things, being the underdog could be the best possible thing for Andrew DiMolanta, because when he was the underdog against Scrimshaw, he was so much more motivated, or at least it felt like he was so much more motivated than when he was the favorite against Molly Damon. So I don't know what's going to happen, but what I do know is that this Star Wars Championship that's happening later today is going to be insane. And I cannot wait to watch it. 5-round match, speed round involved with the new speed round format. So we're going to get the really good look at that in game. I'm super excited about it. And if you can't tell, because I've said it a million times now, I think that it's a coin toss for who can win it. I talked about last week that I thought DiMolanta was the favorite to win the whole tournament. After we got better looks at all the competitors in the tournament, but I also said that Ace was a dark horse to win, and I think he's looking like less of a dark horse and maybe more of a potential favorite, just given the way he's been performing over the course of his last few matches. And then one final thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to this match was the phenomenal sports moment. Winston's brought back into the into the main room, into where we can see him, and he's just tearing up at the way that Ace performed, and man, that was a real sports moment. You felt for him. The Cinderella making it all the way to the finals. The 8th seed that nobody expected to get past his second match, let alone get as far as he did. I mean, when I made my predictions earlier this year, I had him losing to Quevedo. I had no idea that we would see Ace in the finals. I thought we were seeing Molly Damon versus Laura Kelly. So I was off on both sides, but Ace has proved everybody wrong on his way to the finals, and nobody's been in his corner except for his faction and especially his manager, Winston Marshall. This match, there wasn't any big like manager moments. There wasn't a big challenge, or a particularly big challenge that had a major effect on the game. Nevertheless, this match put Winston over for me as manager of the year. As far as that race is concerned, up until that point, I had Tom Dagnino. I felt like Bobby Gucci's management of both the Barbarian and Andrew DiMolanta was enough to give him the manager of the year, on top of the fact that he's just winning everything they throw in front of him. But Winston's just pure devotion to his players. The fact that he's able to get wins with multiple teams, with multiple players this season, coming into it on his first season as a manager, I think that unless something majorly blows up the rest of the season, he doesn't have to win, the faction championship to win manager of the year. I think Winston's got it locked up, just because you see, not only is he having success, but he, hasn't had major slip ups, which I think we've seen from Kate Mulligan. We see a major slip up later in this match. We talk about the Festival Darlings. We talk about, maybe the Brandon Hanna situation as a potential slip up. Winston doesn't have any of that. I think that Winston has the best resume for manager of the year, and it's going to take a lot to sway me from that as of right now. I mean, Finstock, unfortunately, all the things that go in his favor, having drafted the 4 former champions and those sorts of things, those are great. But they're also a detriment to how I evaluate him as a manager, because Ben Bateman doesn't need a super strong manager. John Roca doesn't need a super strong manager. Dan Murrell doesn't need a super strong manager. So, when those guys go out and get wins, I feel like they would get wins under anybody. The management isn't having a huge factor on that, other than they need a manager that's going to, like LeBron, they need a manager or a coach that's going to kind of fall in line with them and their philosophy for how they want to attack things. They're not looking to change for their manager. They're looking for their manager to change for them. So that's where Winston has the advantage, is he really has full malleability over the success of his roster. He doesn't have those he has high talents, but he doesn't have those super high level players that are, I don't want to say above management, but, where management isn't required. He's got people where he can step in and make an impact, and he's proving that at every opportunity he has to make that impact, he's doing it, which is really important. So we're going to move out of Star Wars and into the Inner Geekdom. The first match we saw last week was Mike Kalinowski taking on Greg Idris Alba in Kalinowski's return to the Inner Geekdom, one of the last, of the old guard. And I wanted to take a moment heading into this match to talk about Kalinowski's promo. There were only little bits and pieces of it that were tossed into the actual match promo, but it was posted on Twitter and we retweeted it at RTQ Podcast. So be sure to follow us there to stay up to date with these kinds of things. But it was cinematic as you watch him go into the storage shed and pull out his binder and then, open it up to begin his studying. And, that's just what I want from the Schmodown. It's, just goofy enough, but at the same time, it's not, there's a weight to it, but it's not something you would see in the NBA. The NBA isn't taking a camera crew out to Chris Paul's house to like film him lacing up his basketball shoes before he steps onto the court to practice for his last season or something crazy like that. But you can get away with that kind of stuff because of the theatricality of the Schmodown. And I think that helps elevate this sport to the next level above everything else. And, you know, it's been said that was all Mike Kalinowski's doing. And I got to say, you know, more of that. I love that. I love the Last Jedi, Adam Witt, Molly Damon thing earlier this season. I want more of that stuff. You know, just like I talked about last week, where I want more of the Finstock zaniness. I want more of the theatric element to the Schmodown. And it's hard in these digital matches. I get it, but I don't want the sport to lose sight of what makes it great either. But that's enough of that. We're going to move into the actual match itself. At the end of round one, the score was 9-7 in favor of Mike Kalinowski, and certainly the ring rust was there a little bit, but, you know, 9 points in round one is strong. It's certainly not what we're used to seeing from him, but, you know, 9 points gets the job done as he has the lead heading into round two. He lands on Middle Earth after spinning away from Marvel movies and goes 4 of 5 for 7 points. And luckily, Greg Alba isn't able to pick up a steal. So then Alba spins DC movies, spins away from that because he knows it's the strength of Mike, but lands on DCEU, which is arguably a stronger strength of Mike's. He's able to go 4 of 5 for 8 points, but he gives up a 1 point steal. So both players pick up a total of 8 points in the round, making the score 17-15 in favor of Mike Kalinowski. And then in round three, Greg Alba takes Kalinowski to his 5, but ultimately falls short as he misses his 3, making the final score 27-22 in favor of Mike Kalinowski. And so Mike Kalinowski has the big win 27-22, and he's back in the Innergeekdom. A little bit of ring rust, but other than that, he looks like Mike Kalinowski. I don't know what else to say. I mean, he'll fine-tune himself a little bit here and there as he continues to move forward towards that belt. But what this match really showed for me was twofold. One, I'm really excited to see his matchup upcoming with Eric Zipper. I think that's going to be a really exciting match. Seeing Mike Kalinowski not just ace his way through the match, seeing him play with, a little bit more of a strategy to his game, seeing him play where he's not getting every single question right was something, but also knowing that Zipper's been studying, and after the look we got at Zipper last week, I think that this matchup's going to be really close and it's going to be really tough. So I'm all in for close matches, for good matches, and I think we're going to get one between Kalinowski and Zipper. The other big thing about this match is that sometimes you win by losing. And that's exactly what I think Greg Alba did. I posted on Twitter talking about the biggest surprises of both tournaments so far. And like the obvious answer is, of course, Andres Ace Cabrera, who, went on this phenomenal, unexpected Star Wars run. But I think that another big surprise was Greg Alba of the Real Rejects. He opens up with that KO over Warfather, and then he follows that up by going toe-to-toe with Mike Kalinowski. I think that he might be in that comeback player of the year race at the moment. Him, Ace, a couple other players are kind of in that conversation. Dimolanta certainly are in that conversation for the Comeback Player of the Year award. And look, Greg Alba is going to be a major player in IG. I just have this feeling about just watching him play against Kalinowski here. He takes Kalinowski to his 5. If he gets the right manager that's able to convince him to stick with this, he's going to be big in INNERGEEKDOM. And, unfortunately he gets the bad draw, but he proves enough to make him a larger pick going into next year's draft. And, he's not one of those top level talents that are likely to be signed to a team prior to the draft. So, as teams are looking away from who they're going to sign and who they're going to draft, I think he's got to be high on everybody's big boards heading into next season, even if he doesn't play again this year, just based on his performance in IG and his team's potential, even if the real rejects aren't able to stay together. So now we'll move on to the final match of the week, which saw Robert the Spider Parker taking on Ben the Bandit Goddard. And this was another great match. We saw something that I don't think we were ever expecting to see. Robert Parker misses his first question. And, obviously, yes, we were expecting to see Robert Parker miss a question eventually, but you knew it was going to be a big news story when it happened, and it happens in this match. However, it doesn't happen in round 1 as Parker goes up 11-8 over Goddard. Goddard just misses a couple questions, one about taglines, something he struggled with this season. And the other question was off the Rosie Perez, the Birds of Prey question, off the infamous caca call. We'll get into the role of announcers and that sort of thing later. But scores 11-8 at the end of round 1 in favor of Robert Parker. Then in round 2, Parker goes first. He spins away from Star Wars, lands on DC movies, and goes 4 of 5 for 8 points. Unfortunately, in missing his first question, he also gives up a 1-point steal to his opponent in Ben Goddard. So Ben Goddard's in a pretty good space here. With the right wheel spin, things could have really gone his way in this match. Unfortunately, he spins Star Wars and, off the advice of his manager, decides to stick with it. He ends up going 3 of 5 for 4 points and also gives up 2 steals for 3 points. So obviously, with hindsight being 2020, it's clear that Star Wars was not the right choice for Ben Goddard. I mean, that's clear enough just looking at his performance. But how much of this can you pin on him? How much of this can you pin on his manager? And how much can you pin on this being a difficult Star Wars category? And I think that all of those are shared equally in that Kate probably shouldn't have advised him to stick with Star Wars. I don't think in INNERGEEKDOM and Star Wars, I don't think you should be playing based on your opponent as much as I think you should be playing based on your own skill level. I think you'll get more wins that way. I think it's different in singles and teams. There's more strategy into, there's more opposition research involved. But in INNERGEEKDOM and Star Wars, I think you just have to stick with the stuff you know. And they ultimately, talked about the fact that Parker spun away from it. And so, there's the opportunity here that maybe this isn't something he's strong in. But at that point, when you're playing scared of your opponent, is when you're kind of not in the right mindset. I think spin away from it, see what you get, and maybe you get something better, a Middle Earth, something that, Goddard was going to be stronger in, but ultimately Star Wars was just the wrong pick. And look, Star Wars tournament is going on. So, typically speaking, the Inner Geekdom Star Wars questions are easier than the Star Wars division questions. But even still, when you're in a difficult question writing mind, I think that makes it hard to, transition to write easier questions for another division. So maybe while they're writing Star Wars questions pretty rapidly at the moment, sticking away from Star Wars, unless your name is Alex Damon, might be the best bet. And then to close it out, Goddard clawed his way back. He hits his 2-3 and his 5, but Parker, remains strong to close out the game. 27-24 is your final. And, our Elite Eight is set as we take a look at the bracket. Next week, we're going to see the Barbarian take on John Humphrey, along with Brandon Hanna taking on Alex Damon. But if we're looking at the opposite side of things, seeing Parker and Kalinowski both advance, those two matches on the bottom half of the bracket are going to be really crazy matches. Because Parker, he shows in this match that he's not invincible. So I think that, Chance really tightens up his game. He has the potential to really make his mark and beat Parker. Look, Parker's everybody's odds-on favorite to win the tournament, and I wouldn't argue against that. I picked Alex Damon, but I can see Parker winning the whole thing. That being said, Chance surprised me with his performance in round 1. I think that if Parker has a couple other slip-ups, Chance might be able to. Chance's experience just in the league in general may be enough to put him over the edge. And, that will be fun to watch. 100%, no matter what, it will be fun to watch. The other thing, I alluded to it earlier, that's important to talk about is the role of the announcer. What is okay for an announcer to talk about? What is okay for an announcer to do at the desk? And I am on the side of things. I think it's pretty obvious that I'm really into the entertainment value of the Schmodown. And I don't think that asking and answering questions is all that interesting just by itself. So I think that you need a little bit of banter at the desk in order to make things interesting. You need somebody saying something, telling a joke, interacting at the desk, especially during round 1 when it's a little bit lighter stakes, in order to keep the momentum of the match, to keep people engaged and entertained. Because once you get out of round 1 and like the actual story of the match starts to take place, people are going to naturally become more invested in it. But especially, at the beginning, you really gotta say, hey, you should keep tuning into this. That being said, you can get away with a caw sound when you're in the studio, probably because there's some distance between you and the competitor. When everybody's wearing earphones, a caw sound, a loud, high-pitched sound like that probably isn't the best thing to do. So, I'll put a caveat on this match that the caw sound probably wasn't appropriate. But at the same time, I'm not jumping on the fence of outlaw all banter. All banter is forbidden, because then we're just going to get into guys asking and answering questions, because, I don't want to say it's a slippery slope, but I don't believe this would ever happen. But if you outlaw banter, then what's to say you won't outlaw the entrances? And what's to say you won't outlaw, the story elements of the Schmodown? Because all of that stuff is kind of connected, and all of that stuff is what makes the Schmodown great. And I don't want to see us lose the characters and the the theatrical elements of the Schmodown, just because we're trying to make it hyper competitive. I think there's got to be a balance of the two. And obviously sometimes it's going to be more competitive and sometimes it's going to be more character driven, and that's okay, but they've still got to maintain that balance. And that all stems from the banter, and the way the announcers treat the matches just as much as the way the competitors treat the matches. But, another thing, we talked about ALBA kind of winning by losing. Goddard wins by losing in this match too, because just about everything went against him. Whether it's the Caca in round one, whether it's spinning Star Wars in round 2, he showed a lot of heart to be able to stick with it throughout that whole match. I predicted last week that there was going to be an upset, and when I said that, Ace was kind of in the back of my mind, but what I really thought was that Goddard was going to shock the world to beat Parker. And with a little more luck, I think he does it. I think he just got some bad luck in this match, and that happens to everybody. Sometimes you just get hit with the bad luck, but it should be a statement to Goddard's strength as a competitor that he's able to stick with it, because a lot of people would have folded after the Caca, and maybe he did a little bit, but not to the extreme where he just couldn't recover from it. And then a lot of other competitors would have folded after his performance in round 2, but he didn't do it there either. So, Goddard, I said it at the beginning of the show, but I'll reiterate it again here. I think he's the front runner for Rookie of the Year, and I think he's showing all the traits of a dominant competitor, and all it will take is, more time, more matches under his belt, and he'll be at that elite status. I truly believe that. He's a rookie. It's his first season. There's going to be some missteps. There's going to be some wheel choice mistakes, but over time, I think that as long as he continues to really commit and play at this level, there's no reason why he can't be a top level competitor in the future. So one last thing left in the show, and that's taking a look at the standings. Here we have the standings to this point. Obviously, the Finstock Exchange still up on top, but the Corruption and the Dungeon, with their wins this week, make some big moves. And obviously, Swag holding on to their second place spot with their win also. But the big news of the week is Corruption and the Dungeon moving up to 4 and 5. On top of that, what's really important out of them making that move is that they still have both of their competitors still in the IG tourney, which means they've got more opportunities to rack up points. And that's huge because, if you look at a Swag or you look at the Den, they're out. They have to focus on singles now because they've got nothing for them in IG. So it's really, really important for Corruption in the Dungeon to capitalize on it now. And obviously they play each other this week. So, let's say Corruption. Well, not this week. Let me reiterate. They play each other over the next couple weeks in this next round. Whether you're looking at Chance and Parker or you're looking at Kalinowski and Zipper, I think it's really important to note that Corruption or the Dungeon, whoever it is, needs to really put it over on the other one. Both players on both sides of the bracket need to get this win to knock the other team down a peg. Because let's just say Corruption gets both wins. Kalinowski beats Zipper and Chance miraculously beats Parker. The Dungeon's severely limited then, because not only are they limited in IG as they're out, but they're also severely limited in singles too. So, these upcoming weeks are make or break for the dungeon and for corruption. These upcoming weeks are also make or break for the Rockstars and the Burning Droogs. This week, the Droogs have Hannah taking on Alex Damon of the Rockstars, and the Droogs and the Rockstars are kind of in that middle pack. The Mercs too. They're all in that middle section, and I wouldn't even call them in the middle pack anymore since corruption in the dungeon moved up. They're kind of in that. They're not at the bottom, but they're in that lower pack with 9 points. Everything rests on their competitors in the IG tourney to get wins in order to move them up by corruption, to move them up into the next level. Because all they have to do, anybody out of the 4 of those teams, 5 of those teams if we count the Mercs, the Droogs, the Rockstars, corruption, the dungeon, and the Mercs all need to get their competitors to go as far as possible in the INNERGEEKDOM tourney so that they can get as close as possible for the singles tournament. And same thing goes for swag, but on a different level here, because swag needs Ace to get the next win in the Star Wars tournament to bring them as close as possible to the Finstock Exchange in order to close the gap in the singles tournament. Everything's about closing the gap here, because the smaller the gap, the more likely it is that somebody can overtake somebody else when we get to the singles tournament. But if somebody falls out, whichever team it is that falls out of the tournaments this week is going to be put into a tough spot for going into the singles tournament and going into the end of the year. You look at somebody like the Usual Suspects. I don't want to write them out because they have opportunities later in the year, but they're almost written out because they weren't able to close the gap with the Star Wars and INNERGEEKDOM tournament. So that's going to do it for the show this week. Be sure to check out rtqpodcast.com. We launched last week. Got a great response to the site. But for all your Schmodown news, be sure to check out rtqpodcast.com. We've got just about everything you might need to know there. At any rate, be sure to follow us at RTQ Podcast on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Be sure to look us up on Anchor. We're on all podcasting platforms thanks to Anchor, so be sure to check us out there if you prefer your show in audio format. But just know that if you're choosing to listen to the podcast version of the show, you're only getting about half the show, so be sure to tune in on video too. Check us out on YouTube. YouTube.com/David Sackrider for that. At any rate, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for tuning in, and so long.